This video is going to talk about the structure of DNA and what DNA contains. So what is the first question? What is DNA? Well, it stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA. And it's what makes us unique or individual. So it's the reason I have blue eyes, white skin, brown hair. And each person then has something different about their DNA strands. So if we look at this typical example or diagram of a DNA, you'll notice that it's made up of what looks like a red ribbon and a blue ribbon. So the colour is irrelevant. What this is showing then is that we have two separate strands, and those two strands then are twisted together. So we refer to this as a double helix. Double meaning made of two strands, and helix meaning that we basically twisted it together. So if we untwist it, what we would get instead is a ladder type shape made of two strands on the left and the right hand side. That's basically the backbone of the molecule. And then connected those then, we will have individual pieces that have an attraction to the other strand on the other side of the DNA molecule. So what we need to do then is look at what is the backbone made of, and what are these individual links that seem to have an attraction with the second strand in a DNA molecule. So the first thing we need to look at is a nucleotide. So a nucleotide is made up of three parts. We typically represent this in textbooks as a circle, then a pentagon, and a rectangle. The shapes are irrelevant. What each one represents then is important. So if I was to go to my double helix and I was to look at my ladder formation for DNA, what I'm really doing then is basically taking a section as highlighted in my diagram. So each one of these sections, a small section of the backbone, and then this little piece here, each one of those then is referred to as a nucleotide. And that's made up of three parts. You have the circular piece here. That's called a phosphate group. And in chemistry, a phosphate group is one phosphorus atom, 4 oxygen atoms, and it has a charge of 3 negative. So all we have to know is that this section here is called a phosphate group. The pentagon then, that represents a sugar. And that sugar molecule, in the case of DNA, is called deoxyribose. So I'll just write that down. Deoxyribose is the name of the sugar. And we know it's a sugar because it ends in OSE, and that tells us that it has a sugar section to it. The final thing then, in a nucleotide, which is a small section of our DNA molecule, is what we refer to as a base, or a nitrogenous base. That means a molecule or a part of our DNA that contains nitrogen. This part is what makes us individual. So every person in your class will have a phosphate joined to a sugar. And this pattern will repeat on and on. Phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, all the way down the backbone. What's different about each person then is each of these nitrogenous bases is the order. It's what each one is made of and the order that we have. And it forms a code that we read as our DNA. There's 4 types of nitrogenous base. So this rectangle here, in a molecule of DNA, we have 4 options. We have A for adenine, T for thymine, C for cytosine, and G for guanine. Each one of these is a nitrogenous base, but they can only bond on the other side or attract the other side of the DNA molecule if they find their matching partner. So an adenine will only ever attract a thymine and vice versa, and cytosine will only ever attract a guanine. Now these attractions, you'll notice that between adenine and thymine there's 2 lines, there's 2 attractions, or 3 lines for 3. These attractions are called hydrogen bonds. And it's basically a force of attraction that will pull the adenine towards the thymine. So you might have an adenine paired up with a thymine. If we had a cytosine there, a guanine there, and a thymine there, if we were asked to work out the matching code, the C must always attract a G, a guanine. If we looked at the guanine, it must always attract a cytosine, and a thymine must always attract an adenine. So this pattern will get repeated down. You'll have the circle attached to the pentagon, attached to the rectangle. Then you'll have another circle attached to the pentagon, attached to the rectangle. This section here, the two long strands of the ladder, that's our backbone, and we call that the phosphate sugar backbone, or the sugar phosphate backbone, because that's the same for everybody. The order of these bases then decides what we're going to have in terms of our DNA makeup. So what will we look like? How will we act? What skills or talents might we have? This nucleotide is a small molecule. It's made up of 3 small parts, so we call it a monomer. This means that it's small, and then we're going to need lots of them. When we join all these nucleotides together, we get our DNA molecule. Our DNA molecule then is a long molecule. We refer to that as a polymer. Poly means many. It means many, many nucleotides all joined together to form a long chain molecule. So that's it for the start. The structure of DNA. It makes us individual or unique. DNA is made up of a series of nucleotides all joined together to form a long chain. A nucleotide is made up of 3 individual parts: phosphate, a sugar, and a base. In DNA, there's 4 possible types of bases. And those 4 possible types are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Depending upon which one you have, that will then decide or tell you which one it's going to have to pair up with. So when you build a molecule of DNA, if you have a sequence, adenine, thymine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, guanine, thymine, adenine, cytosine, if we're pairing up along the bottom, then the other strand must be T, A, G, C, C, A, T, G. So you've got to make sure that you know which one pairs with which base in order to be able to read the code.